at Spirt Mountain Casino inside of the BetMGM Sportsbook. I'm down here right now getting ready for the Summer Adventures drawings, which are every Tuesday during the month of June. And since I'm here, I'd love to have Justin on. We'll handicap the Stanley Cup Finals as Tom Dundon looks to get his championship with the Hurricanes, getting ready to take on the Las Vegas Golden Knights tonight, Game 1 at 5 on ABC. That Game 1 will be in Raleigh at the Lenovo Center. And we'll get his take on the Knicks and Spurs, which we have San Antonio as a favorite, but not a massive favorite. And we'll dive into some baseball as well with Justin Ballenger. Now, I'll let you know, I am waiting to hear back from Clyde the Glide Drexler. I'm trying to get him on the show today to share some thoughts on Rick Adelman. So I'm hoping for Clyde the Glide at 5:20. I'll keep you updated and posted on whether or not he's going to be able to join the program. But you can jump on board. I'd love to hear your voice. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number, 503-248-0620. I'll get into some specific matchups of the NBA Finals that I'm really looking forward to watching to see how they unfold. You know, important things that are going to determine the outcome of the series. So we'll get to that in the program. I also want to remind you that coming up at 5 o'clock, we've got Hops Ticket Tuesday. So it started last Tuesday, and we're going to do this every progressive Tuesday throughout the baseball season where you have a chance to win a 4-pack of tickets for the Hops. And tonight at 5, we got a 4-pack of tickets to see the Hops take on Tri-Cities for Craft Beer Night. It's going to be Thursday, June 11th at Hops Ballpark. You can get more details by going to hillsborohops.com. But there you have it, Craft Beer Night at the new Hillsboro Hops Ballpark. And I've talked about the park. I've been out there. And if you haven't been there, make sure you listen at 5 for your chance to win because it is spectacular. When you walk in, you're not going to believe that you're in a minor league ballpark because it's got the feel of a major league ballpark. It's just smaller in scale, but a tremendous place to watch baseball. And I can attest this because I've seen it with my own eyes. But if you talk to anyone that works for the Hops, I've asked them all the same question. You know, what stands out the most about the new ballpark? And they all say the same thing. It's the detail. They really paid attention to the details when they put this bad boy together. I want you to have a chance to experience it and see it with your own eyes, and what a family night that would be. So Hops Ticket Tuesday coming up at 5 o'clock. I've got a golf tournament coming up this weekend out at Willamette Valley Country Club with Nancy Janes, the Godfather's wife, a couple's Chapman over the course of 2 days. And so ever since the Blazer season ended, I've been pouring myself into golf. Practice, my lessons, playing, and getting a chance to get out. I love it so much, and it's enjoyable. And this morning, I had a chance to play with a gentleman that works over at Heron Lakes. And I've seen him there all the time, and I talk to him all the time. I know him as Don, but his first name is Donnell. Last name is Smith, like the most common last name on the entire planet, Donnell Smith. But he's one of those guys where, and I'm sure you can relate to this, whether it's at a golf course or maybe it's at a restaurant or someone you see at the store, someone that you know that you cross paths with on a regular basis. You talk to them, they're very friendly, and you just enjoy the time that you're around them. And that's the way I've always kind of felt about Donnell, is that he's always smiling. He's got a very positive attitude. I think he's retired now. He's got 2 daughters who are grown, but this is a very good man. And so I get a chance to cross paths with him all the time, but I haven't had the opportunity to get out and play golf with him. And today we did. I had a tee time set up for 6:50. And when I got to the tee box, he was there. And so it was great to be able to spend a few hours on the course with Donnell as we were bumping around. I did not know this until after the round, but the 50-year anniversary just took place. Donnell Smith, 50 years ago, won the Oregon Amateur Championship. And I got to give him credit because I think he told me he was in his 70s. I can't remember the exact age. I don't really make a habit of asking people their exact age. I don't even know the Godfather's exact age. He won't tell me, and I'm not going to ask. I just feel like that's an invasion. But Donnell, for his age, still moves incredibly well. He swings the club incredibly well. Like, you can tell this is a guy that's played the game of golf, but I had no idea that he had won the Oregon Amateur Championship. So I made sure to let him know that that's pretty sweet, and that's something to celebrate. And I can't believe that it was 50 years ago today, but it was great to be out on the course with him. Now, I should say that if you tune into the show tomorrow or possibly early next week and I'm not here, it's going to be because I committed suicide. And it might be by taking a putter and just ramming it straight into my skull. My putting over the last couple of days has been horse bleep. Absolute garbage. I mean, how many putts do you need to take to be able to get the ball in the hole, you moron? So the putting is just driving me insane. And it's pretty funny how you can look back at your rounds and the ones that you struggle in, and it's like, well, if I would have done a better job of putting the ball, you moron, you wouldn't have these issues. So I just want to take the putter and ram it into my face. I want to stab myself in the skull. I want to do whatever it takes to inflict damage upon myself to be able to get my putting game right. So let's go ahead and take a look at this here. How many putts did I have today? Yeah, 34 putts. That translation, hot garbage. It's like, and I'll tell you what, it was one of those days, too, where I was enjoying the time with Donnell because he's such a sweet human being. But as we were in conversation and they would walk off the green, I didn't want to act like a fool, so I was mumbling under my breath to myself. And that's usually what happens when I'm not putting the ball well or something goes sideways. The internal conversation I'm having with me is not always a positive one. It's like, what are you, a dum-dum? Well, what are you afraid of? Hit the ball. It's like, can you not putt, you idiot? Are you blind? So anyways, it's going to drive me crazy. The game, golf is a brutal, brutal mistress. Sometimes you're in love, and other times you just want to take the putter and ram it in your face. But Donnell's a good dude, and it was great to be out with him. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. 503-248-0620. Let's go out to John from Garden Home. John, I appreciate the phone call. You're up on the Rip City Drive. What's on your mind?
Oh, I just wanted to remind your good citizen voters out there to dump our current governor come November and vote someone in who's a little more sports-minded. She almost cost us the Blazers, and she's not going to do anything about baseball. So, wake up, Portland.
Hey, let me ask you a question, John. Are you confident that the council is going to be able to get a deal done to keep Tom Dundon in town for an extended period of time?
Confident, yes.
Okay.
Silver.
That's good.
Silver came out. He made it clear the Blazers are staying.
Yeah, I think they're going to stay. I do. I don't think the Blazers are going to leave. Obviously, anytime government or the bureaucracy gets involved and you got to rely on them to get something done, it's a little bit nerve-wracking. But, yeah, I think they're going to get the deal done. The money's there. But with this expanded council, it's just going to take a little bit of time. Nothing goes quick usually when it comes to bureaucracy.
I think we should be saying go Hurricanes tonight.
Oh, for sure. I'm actually excited for Tom Dundon. Can you imagine how thrilled he is to know that his team is 4 wins away from a championship? That's pretty sweet.
Go Hurricanes.
Yeah, go Hurricanes. All right, I appreciate it. There's John, 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. My buddy John Heipkemper has reached out. He said, dude, that would be insane to have Clyde the Glide on. Well, I reached out to Clyde. He's super cool. And obviously I love Clyde Drexler. The guy's freaking awesome. But the problem is a lot of these old-timers, they're on the golf course all day long. They're either practicing, they're playing, or they're hanging out at the clubhouse after their round. So I don't want to disturb Clyde the Glide's game, but he lives in Houston. They're 2 hours ahead. So my guess is at the time I want him on the show that he's not going to be on the golf course. A lot of these guys, especially when they live in places where it's hotter than HE-double hockey sticks during this time of the year, they're not playing afternoon rounds. They're going out in the morning and getting done before it starts to get blazing hot. So we'll see. But Clyde the Glide would be a great person to talk to. And I thought it was pretty impressive yesterday when I was talking to Dwight Janes, and he was sharing stories about Rick Adelman, who not only was a great coach, he got his start at Chemeketa College, for crying out loud. That's a pretty meteoric rise to go from Chemeketa to the NBA. But Dwight was saying that his staff, he and his staff would get together before the season would get underway, and they would take a look at their roster, look at their players, look at what they have, and then they would try to devise a system to make sure that everybody was involved, that they were going to put every single player, not just one or two guys, not just Clyde and Terry, but put everybody in a position to have a chance at success. I like that. And if you go back and watch some of those games on YouTube, and there's plenty of old Blazer games on YouTube, which is sweet, you'll notice the player movement and ball movement and the way those guys got up and down. It's pretty awesome. He also said that Rick Adelman learned how not to deal with Clyde from Dr. Jack, that he was going to let Clyde be Clyde and not try to rein him in all the time and piss him off, but just let him be Clyde. You go out and be you and play your game, and we'll live with the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think that's the right approach. So hopefully Clyde, and, I feel for those guys. And Clyde Drexler shared a couple of quotes. We'll get that from Kerry coming up on the show at 4:20. But, when you hear from the players who played for him, and then I looked around last night, so many different people in the front office, former players, had so many different things to say about Rick Adelman, all positive. He was beloved. And he's probably the best coach in not only Trailblazer franchise history, but Kings franchise history. So Kerry Eggers is going to join us at 4:20. But a big thanks to Donnell's for spending a few hours with me on the golf course this morning. But when you can't putt, here's the best way to describe me on the greens today. Who's that guy for the Knicks that when he gets to the free throw line, he's about to lay up a brick? Is it Mitchell Robinson? It's Mitchell Robinson. He is the most uncomfortable guy to watch at the free throw line in the game today. It's going to brick. He's going to hit the back iron. I was Mitchell Robinson on the greens today. And it got to the point where you stand over the ball and you're like, I'm going to miss this. I have no idea what it's going to do. I have no feel. I am a moron. All right, we'll keep things rolling. Coming back, Justin Ballenger, sportsbook manager here at Spirt Mountain Casino, will join me, and we'll handicap the Stanley Cup Finals, the NBA Finals. We'll talk a little baseball. You got the Rip City Drive with Chad Doing. All right, Miranda has chimed in once again. Dear Skunk Vomit, good afternoon, Mr. Doing. Did you really just say we'll talk a little baseball? Come on, dude. Nobody believes that. Now, Miranda, you know I love baseball. I love going to games. I love watching it. I just don't get as much of an opportunity to talk about it on the show. But one of the biggest things I wanted to ask Justin Ballenger, sportsbook manager here at Spirt Mountain Casino, was how to deal with teams like the Yankees and Dodgers when they are heavily favored night in and night out. How do you deal with that as a sportsbook manager or someone that wants to, get in on some plays with the baseball? So that's what we're looking at. And the Mariners trying to make it 8 straight tonight with the Mets in town, game 2 of that series. And it's nice to see the Mariners getting a little momentum and getting some of the run support that's required. Last night the pitching was good. They're probably going to get good pitching again tonight. So we'll see how things shake out. But the Mariners creating a little less stress in their fan base's hearts right now. With the NBA Finals, Mike Brown, head coach of the Knicks, had a chance to talk, and he's like, hey, I may have connections with the franchise, but I want to kick their behind-o.
You'll be facing them in this thing and separate yourself from those connections?
No, because they definitely want to beat me, and I want to kick their ass. So they love them, and you can always love them before and after. In Cleveland, Jawad Williams, very close to him. I coached him. He worked with me. Also, Mike, people didn't know this, but Mike Garrity, he's on the front of the bench. Mike got into the NBA because when I took the Lakers job, I took my son to YMCA one day, and I saw this guy working this little girl out. So I asked the little girl's father, I said, who was that? Who is that? Because I just liked his demeanor and the whole 9 yards. He goes, oh, that guy's name is Mike Garrity. I said, Mike Garrity? He goes, he played at Mater Dei, which was where my son was, Mater Dei High School, and then he played collegiately here and there. And so then I went to Mike, and I said, we don't know each other. My son plays at Mater Dei. Will you start working my son out? He said, yeah. So he worked my son out for 2 years, and then when I got Cleveland's job, I brought him with me to Cleveland. So he wasn't quite the nanny, but he did work my oldest son out. So Mike Garrity, I tried to hire him twice, but he and I are really close. And I wanted to kick his ass. So there's ties. No. So I had ties to Cleveland. I got ties to San Antonio, and you appreciate the people, you appreciate the journey, and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, just like they want to beat you, you definitely want to beat them.
That's Knicks head coach Mike Brown. He's one of the really good people in the game of basketball, and I got to give him credit. I thought the Knicks made a terrible mistake by getting rid of Coach Thibodeau to bring in Mike Brown. I was like, what are these guys doing? Because I've never really thought Mike Brown was a great head coach, but look at all the things that he's done. The way I saw him described that was interesting, they used the Warriors as an example. Coach Thibodeau is Mark Jackson, and Mike Brown is Steve Kerr. I don't know if I buy that, but I do think Mike Brown's done a good job. And he's put his players in the best position possible to have success. Most importantly, Karl Anthony Towns, and look at the run they made through the postseason. The problem with the Knicks this year is that they underachieved during the regular season. I think the conventional wisdom was going into the season with the injury to Jason Tatum that the pathway was clear because the Pacers had injury concerns, the Celtics had injury concerns, and the Knicks should have cruised through the regular season, and you thought they were going to grab the number 1 seed, but that didn't happen. They had stretches where they didn't play really good basketball. The Pistons were hot throughout the regular season, and New York winds up in a spot where they didn't have home court, and they weren't playing their best basketball, so you really didn't know what to anticipate. And then they come out early in that series in Atlanta in the first round and get down 2-1, and their entire fan base was freaking out. But that's when they made some adjustments. They put Karl Anthony Towns in a position to be a facilitator, and the rest is history. They have been on fire. 11 straight wins, dominant on both ends of the floor, and well-connected. And they're getting great play from, their big-time players, their starters, Jalen Brunson, of course, Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby, but they're also getting some role players to step up and make contributions, guys like Landry Shamet or Mitchell Robinson. So I credit the work that he's done. I think it's pretty impressive. Now, there's a couple of matchups I want to talk about here. that are going to be critical in this series. Now, obviously, it all starts with Victor Wembanyama. I mean, he's the alien. He's the one player on the floor that no one really has an answer for. And the question is, which Victor Wembanyama are we going to see? If you go back to the Western Conference Finals with the Spurs and Thunder, in the games where Wembanyama was aggressive early and lived in the paint and was a dominant force on both ends, the Spurs won those games. In the games where he wasn't aggressive and the Spurs didn't get him the ball in good position in the paint early in the game, he was relegated to being a perimeter player, and those were the games that they lost. So really, I think it starts with the mindset of Victor Wembanyama, and this might be one of the challenges of being a young basketball player, but it's understanding who you are and how you need to play night in and night out to win a championship, to be that guy for your team. And it's going to be Victor Wembanyama really setting the tone early in games, establishing position. Now, the issue for Wembanyama is he doesn't have a go-to move that he can rely upon. So the Spurs are going to have to be creative in finding different ways to get him down low. But it's going to start with his mindset and mentality to be aggressive and to get into the paint, and making sure that the guards are looking to get him lob passes, that he's establishing his position down low, that if he's in those spots where he's one-on-one with Karl Anthony Towns, that he's being aggressive to try and get him into foul trouble. And Victor's got to be creative in being able to get into a position to where he can use one dribble and get into the paint. And really, I guess the best way I saw it described is play Nerf hoop. He's got to have that mentality like we did in our rooms when we were playing Nerf hoop, where you get the basketball and you're just looking to throw it down. Like, get down low, be aggressive. And if he plays that way, there's not going to be much of an answer for Victor Wembanyama. Now, the one thing the Knicks have is, compared to the Thunder, they've got more size across the board. They're just a longer, bigger-bodied team that I think is going to match up really well with San Antonio compared to what we saw from the Thunder. And so the Knicks' size is something that they can lean on, right? Because they've got bigger guys to defend on the perimeter, guys like OG and Mikal Bridges, to deal with the physical guard play of Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle. But they've also got a guy in Karl Anthony Towns who's a 7-footer, has incredible wingspan and length, and in those spots at times in the series where he's one-on-one with Wemby, he'll be able to create some problems. But the key for Towns is just staying out of foul trouble. But for Wemby, it's mindset. And then the coaching staff and the teammates around him to make sure they get him the ball in good position to where he can have a dramatic impact. If he lives in the paint in the series, the Spurs are going to win the championship. If the Knicks are able to force him away from the basket and put him in a position to where he's playing the mid-range game, the Knicks are going to win the series. Now, something that's related to Victor Wembanyama is who he's going to be defending on the other end. And it looks like it's probably going to be Josh Hart. Now, if you look at the early part of the series against the Thunder, Victor Wembanyama was on Alex Caruso. And the reason why they wanted him on Caruso is that it was a guy who they could live and die with if he was going to shoot the three ball. Now, early in the series, I think the first 3 games, Caruso was on fire. He shot 61% from downtown in the first 3 games. And that allowed the Thunder to be able to take a 2-1 series lead. But the reason why they wanted Wemby on Caruso, and they were willing to give up some of those shots, is it allows Wemby to be able to roam and be a rim protector, where he can create havoc, right? So he's staying away from Caruso. He can take a look around, seeing what's happening on the floor, and to be that roaming protector to be able to fly in and swat shots, change shots, and be a force around the rim. So they're probably going to utilize him the same way. There'll be times where, Wemby's going to have to defend Karl Anthony Towns down on the block. And what's interesting about that is that Towns is big enough to go right at Wemby, but he's also got the ability to put the ball on the floor. Now, if the Spurs use somebody else who's a little bit smaller, guys like Julian Champagnie, then Karl Anthony Towns has got the ability to put the ball on the floor and attack the rim. And obviously, if you've got Wemby on Towns, in those moments, it's going to be tough on Wemby because you've got to respect Towns from downtown, and that's a good way to pull Wemby away from the basket. But my guess is Wemby will draw the assignment of Josh Hart. And Josh Hart is going to be in a position to where he's going to have to rise up and be able to knock down shots. And he struggled throughout the course of the postseason knocking down the 3 ball. And that's really what it comes down to. Hart is going to get the same treatment. They're going to leave him alone. They're going to dare him to shoot. And Josh Hart at times is going to have to make the Spurs pay for ignoring him. And if he's unable to make those shots, that means Wemby gets to roam free and just wreak havoc on New York's best scorers. And that's why Josh Hart is going to be critical. Now, he shot, Josh Hart, a career-best 42% from downtown this season, including, I think it was 49% from the corners. But those numbers in the postseason have come down. 31% overall from downtown and 36% from the corners. And that's where he's going to be stationed a ton in the half-court sets. So my guess is the Spurs are going to dare him to shoot. They're going to back off of him. They'll use Wemby so he can be a roamer. And for Josh Hart, he's simply going to have to knock down threes because he's going to be left alone. You've got to make them pay, make them adjust their defense, and find different ways to draw Wemby away from the basket. Because if Wemby's on Hart, he can't make the three. That means he's going to be able to roam and defend and do what he does best. And my guess would be for Josh Hart, you know what happens for a guy like Hart once they get into the postseason, he plays big minutes. And he's an energy guy who really gets after it defensively. He's a physical type player. And so what happens is I think his body starts to break down. And we know what happens with jump shooters, right? When they get tired and fatigue sets in, what takes place? They start to come up a little bit short. They miss their shots. So Josh Hart, the advantage for him now is that he's had a tremendous amount of rest. I think, what was the number I heard yesterday? The Knicks have played 4 basketball games since May 10th. That's how much time they've had off. That's what happens when you sweep teams right out of the postseason, and they've won 11 straight games. So Josh Hart at this stage normally would be fatigued, but after all that time off, he should be energized and, more importantly, be in a position where he can knock down some of those shots. But if he doesn't, that's going to be a serious problem. You've got to find ways to get Wemby away from the basket. Josh Hart's going to have to knock down open threes, especially when he's in the corner in those half-court sets. And for Wembanyama, he's going to have to be aggressive and establish himself in the paint. When he does, the Spurs win. When he doesn't, they lose. It's pretty simple. Now, Mike Brown, the Knicks head coach, we heard him talking about how, you know, even with the ties that he has to the coaching staff, they want to beat him and he wants to kick their ass. That's what he said. But one of the key players on this team, and I've enjoyed watching, another guy that benefited from the rest, OG Anunoby. Physical player, great defender. He's been a three-point shot maker for him. He's done a little bit of everything, and Mike Brown had a chance to talk about his versatility.
With OG, do you feel like it makes him as good as he is for a wing, guarding guys who are so much taller than him?
Well, OG's extremely versatile guard, and you know the luxury of having a guy like that is he's long enough, athletic enough, strong enough to guard quick, smaller guys. He's obviously got the size and athleticism to guard big wings, and then he's got the strength and the length and the intelligence to guard bigger guys. So having a guy like that gives us a ton of versatility to be able to move him around, knowing that he can adapt / adjust or whatever you want to call it on the fly. And that's why at the end of the day, you know, I do sort of like you guys, but you guys were wrong. He should have been first team all defense because of his versatility, and it's shown throughout the course of the most important time during the year, which is the playoffs, and will continue to show going into the finals.
High praise for OG Anunoby from his head coach, Mike Brown. Well, Duke, the UPS guy, has chimed in. He thinks that the Spurs are going to sweep the Knicks right out of the playoffs. That would be impressive. I mean, they're certainly legit, but I don't think they're going to sweep the Knicks right out of the playoffs. I think the Knicks present some matchup problems. I'll give my prediction tomorrow, but I do think the Knicks are a worthy opponent. Now, who was it we talked to? Brad Botkin last week. You know, my dilemma with the Knicks, I think, is probably the same that a lot of you have. You know, they've cruised through the postseason because they played some, you know, lesser teams. They played the Sixers, who were far from 100%. And Joel Embiid really wasn't a factor in this series because of injury. And then they drew the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were exhausted after back-to-back 7-game series, and smoked them right out of the postseason. And even though they lost 2 of the first 3 games in the series, the Atlanta Hawks aren't exactly world beaters, right? So you take care of Atlanta, you take care of Philly, and you take care of Cleveland. That's not a murderer's row of teams in the postseason. So my thought was, are they really that good, 11 straight wins, and they've been dominating by a point margin? Or is it inflated and it's really fool's gold because of the competition they played? But as Brad pointed out, the one advantage is with all the rest that they've had and the fact that the pathway is a little bit easier, they're going to have more energy and will be well rested to be able to go out and provide a stiff challenge. It was the same thing with Indiana last year, right? They had a much easier path to the finals than the Thunder did, and they ended up pushing OKC to 7 games. I didn't think going into that series it'd be a 7-gamer, but it was. So we'll see how things shake out, but I do think the Knicks present some matchup problems. One of them I talked about yesterday. We saw this against Oklahoma City. They rely upon, smaller guards to be able to switch and defend. But the problem is against the Spurs, Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper are big and physical. And they're so good at taking a smaller guard, driving them into the paint, and getting shots right at the rim. That's something they do really, really well. So the issue now is Harper and Castle are going to have bigger guys on them like OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. They're going to get more resistance than what they got from the Thunder's smaller guards to be able to get to their spots and be able to attack the paint. The Knicks are also going to be able to rebound the ball and probably won't get dominated. We saw the Spurs really dominate the offensive glass in that Game 7. I just think the overall size of the Knicks is going to be a much bigger challenge for the Spurs, regardless of the competition they played. Now, I do think there's something to say about being battle-tested, right? Where you go through a couple of wars, maybe a really brutal series against a legit opponent like Oklahoma City, and you come out on top. That's why tomorrow night's going to be so interesting. The Knicks come in with a ton of rest, playing 4 games since May 10th. And then you've got the Spurs who got 3 days off after a 7-game grinder against Oklahoma City. So how's that going to look? But there's no doubt the Spurs are more battle-tested. They played Minnesota. Portland was a stiff challenge in 5 games. And then they got Oklahoma City in the Western Conference Finals. So the Spurs are more battle-tested, but if I had to choose every day of the week, I'm going to take rest over, being battle-tested. I want my guys to be healthy, to have plenty of energy to get ready for the slugfest we're going to see in the finals. All right, 503-248-0620 is the telephone number. The Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Eggers, will join us at 4:20 to share his thoughts on Rick Adelman, the great Trailblazer coach who passed away yesterday at the age of 79. If you want to jump on board, I'd love to hear your voice. You got the Rip City Drive live from the BetMGM Sportsbook at Spirt Mountain Casino on your home of the Blazers, Rip City Radio 620. I think it was Brian Noll last week who suggested the next time I do karaoke, I should sing Doobie Brothers. That is never going to happen. I have done karaoke once in my life, and it was a trio. Me, my buddy Jason, my buddy Corey. We did Easy Lover by Phil Collins and Philip Bailey at some place up in Victoria, BC. There were beverages consumed. It was a bad decision, and I cannot sing. I do not have a singing voice. And Brian O confirmed he does not have a singing voice. He can play the guitar a bit, but he does not have the ability to sing. I'm awful. I wish I could sing. There's a lot of things I wish I could be for like a day just to know what it feels like to be that person or have that type of an ability. But no, I want no part of it. Karaoke. Yikers. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. I've come to a decision. I do not think the Blazers should trade for Giannis. I've been thinking about this for quite some time. Obviously, there are a lot of rumors circling right now that the Blazers could be a fine trade partner with the Bucks. But the problem is I have with this idea of trading for Giannis. Look, I want the Blazers to make a big swing. I've always wanted that. And if they decide to trade for Giannis and go after a big-name player, then that would be exciting. But the problem I have with the move for Giannis, at this stage in his career, for what you would likely have to give up, multiple players and multiple picks, what Giannis are you getting in return? If Giannis were in his 20s, then it's a no-brainer. But the problem is he's not, and he's an aging superstar whose game is predicated on athleticism, and he's not a guy that really helps the bottom line when it comes to three-point shooting. So I'm a little bit concerned about the idea of going after Giannis because the price is going to be so steep, and you got to give up so much to bring in a player of that caliber that I just don't know if it's a good idea. And then you have the other issue of Oklahoma City, San Antonio, and the rest of the teams in the Western Conference. My big question would be this. If the Blazers made a move and brought in Giannis and added him to the starting lineup that featured Dame and Denny, and you've got Donovan Clingan, would that make them a title contender? Now, I saw one trade proposal today that included Miles Turner in the deal. If the Blazers were able to pull that off and bring in Miles Turner and Giannis, would that make them a title contender, seeing what we see around the league in the Western Conference with teams like San Antonio and Oklahoma City? I don't know. It's just risky business when you're unloading multiple assets, young assets, to bring in an aging superstar. I just don't know how many great years he's got left in the tank. So there you have it. I'm concerned about that potential. But if push came to shove and they made the move, I would get behind it 100%, and I would love to see how it plays out. But we'll see. And I think what will happen is, we're getting closer to draft time. It's coming up here towards the end of the month. The Blazers should have a head coach hired here in the next, 2 to 3 weeks, I would think. And then from there, as we hit draft night and into the first part of free agency, that's when the deals are going to get done. And you got to wonder, too, with Tom Dundon, being a new owner in the NBA, does he want to go after the big fish? Does he want to go big game hunting? Is he trying to make a statement right away? I'll tell you one thing. You want to add more people in the seats. You want to, bring in more profit. Go out and make a trade for Giannis. People would show up to watch that all day long. But I'm just concerned at his age and some of the injuries starting to show, how much does he have left in the tank? How much tread is left on the tires? I don't know the answer to that. 2 years, 3 years, he's 31 years old. So that's really the question for you. That's my daily dilemma. Would you want the Blazers to unload multiple picks, multiple players in a deal that would net you Giannis? I'm not saying that I'm not down with Giannis. I'm just saying that at 31, with as much wear and tear that he's had, is it worth what you have to give up to bring him in? And where would that slot the Blazers in the pecking order in the Western Conference? Does that vault them ahead of San Antonio? Does it vault them ahead of Oklahoma City? Does it put them like 4th or 5th in the West? These are all questions that I have that kind of roll around in my mind. Telephone number 503-248-0620. 503-248-0620. That is the telephone number. NBA Finals will kick off Coming up tomorrow night, game 1 from San Antonio. The Spurs right now a 5-point favorite. And Josh Hart, who is going to have a big role in this series because he's going to be left alone and he's going to have to make shots from downtown. He was asked about the difference of preparing for the Eastern Conference Finals compared to the NBA Finals.
The conference finals last year, you get through the conference finals this year. This is the first time as a group preparing for the finals. Anything different in the room? Anything different about preparation?
No, it's the same old. When you're building championship habits, it's very boring and it's very meticulous and it's frustrating at times, but it never changes. We continue to do, what we do, continue to build those habits, and nothing changes from the first round of the playoffs to the finals. We know we got to be locked in, focused, have attention to detail, physicality, sense of desperation. It's been like that for every single series, every single game of these playoffs, and it doesn't change now that we're in the finals.
All right, a couple other things from Josh Hart. He was asked about Wemby.
Get center on you and you'll be challenged to shoot?
I don't know. I mean, that's the only unanimous defensive player of the year is guarding me, so I think, that's a good sign for me, right? You know what I mean? It means I'm a pretty good basketball player. But, man, I go into the game and I play the game the way the game needs me to play. And if that's shooting or scoring, cool. If that's rebounding, defending, cool. I don't value what I do based on other people's game plan or what the box score says.
Yeah. Okay. One last thing from Hart. He was asked what New York can learn, from the NBA Cup game against the Spurs.
The fact that this was the NBA Cup final, is there something that you can learn from that? But that sort of environment, obviously not a final environment, but something a little bit more than
Nah. I mean, that was December. Obviously, there was good energy around that, but I don't think that's really going to be any equivalent to what, the atmosphere or the energy is going to be like, at their place, obviously at the Garden. So, technically that game didn't happen, so I don't think there's anything that we can learn from.
I'm with Josh Hart on that. This whole idea that somehow the NBA Cup has more significance because it featured the Spurs and Knicks and now those two teams are meeting in the finals, it's absolute rubbish. The regular season tournament is useless, and the NBA Cup doesn't even count on the standings. It's like an extra game. And besides, both lineups for these two teams are different, and the intensity is going to be different because you know why? What they're playing for right now, starting tomorrow night, it matters because you're playing for a Larry O'Brien trophy, a championship, at the tail end of the second season. What makes the NBA championship so special is the fact that teams have to grind through like half of another season. You play 7 games, and then you get to the flipping finals. If you're to play the max 7 games of each series, that would be 28 games, which is, darn near half of a NBA regular season. The grind that you go through to get to where you're at, to get to the finals and win a championship is awesome. And that type of sacrifice and what you have to go through to get to that point makes the reward that much greater. All right, we'll keep things rolling. Kerry Eggers, the Dean of Portland Sports, going to join me on the show at 4:20 to share his thoughts on Rick Adelman. And you can jump on board at 503-248-0620. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, Rip City Radio 620. All right, my friends, it's now 4 o'clock chat here. NBA Finals kickoff tomorrow night in San Antonio. The Spurs will host the Knicks. First time New York's been back in the finals since 1999. They've won 11 straight games in the postseason, but the Spurs are a 5-point favorite in Game 1. Tom Dundon's quest for a championship will start tonight in Raleigh at the Lenovo Center. Hurricanes host the Las Vegas Golden Knights in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals. Puck will drop at 5, coming up on ABC. Aaron Judge out of the lineup tonight for the Yanks with a bone bruise. Jose Caballero will start in the outfield in his place. Mariners are hoping to make it 8 straight wins. Game 2 against the Mets tonight at T-Mobile Park. That first pitch at 6:40. Logan Gilbert will get the call for the M's. Got more of the Rip City Drive coming at you right now. We got Hops Ticket Tuesday coming up at 5. And the Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Eggers, remembering Rick Adelman at 4:20. This is a great song, Say, 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 with Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney. And Paul has shared the story where he was at home one night, and he said the phone rang. He picked up, and Michael Jackson was on the other end. Hey, Paul, it's Michael. You know, in the Michael Jackson voice. And, of course, Paul thought someone was playing a joke on him, so he hung up, and Michael Jackson called back, and he's like, Paul, it's Michael. I want to talk to you. And he said that he asked him if he wanted to get together and make some hits. And so they did, and they did. It's pretty simple. And I love how Michael phrased it, like, not that do you want to get together and make music. Do you want to get together and make some hits? And at the time, harder to find two guys that were better hit makers than Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney. And so they got together. Unfortunately, Paul shared too much insight and wisdom with Michael on how to make money in the business, and he was the one that suggested that Michael Jackson look into publishing. And Michael Jackson ended up buying the Beatles catalog, and it pissed off Paul McCartney, and it fractured their friendship, which is unfortunate. But that's kind of the story of how they got together. Michael rang him and asked him if he wanted to make some hits, and they did. It's pretty sweet. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. The Rams now, after the trade to land Myles Garrett, are the odds-on favorite, the betting pick to win the championship. And I can understand that based on who they're able to bring in, the veterans on the roster. They're loaded up on the offensive end. They beefed up their defense significantly. Their pass defense, especially the cornerback position, they brought in McDuffie. So what was a weakness has now turned into a strength, and they bring in a guy who's going to play and pass rush, who got 23 sacks last year, the Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett. Super stud. Like, I love that move. And the Browns, I think, rightfully identified their window, recognizing that they're not going to win a championship next year. They're not even certain who their quarterback of the future is going to be. So why don't we unload one of our franchise's greats and get some draft capital in return, along with a young player in Jared Verse, who's a good player, on a rookie deal, and we'll put ourselves in a position to play out this upcoming year. And if we don't think that the quarterback of our future is on the roster, we'll be in a good position to be able to draft one. And so I like what the Browns did. I also think the Rams identified their window. You've got a veteran quarterback in Matt Stafford. You've got a veteran roster, and you've got a team right now that is built to win a championship. So you might as well go all in on what it takes to win a championship and get that job done. And so they did it. And that's why I like the Rams' aggressiveness. They identified their window, recognized who they were, what they needed to do, and now they're going to go out and try and get it done. Now, my only thought would be, if you wanted to get down on the Rams to win the championship, the problem when you got a veteran roster is that you're very dependent upon that group to stay healthy, that group to remain intact and available so that you can play and be able to win the big games. And I just wonder, like if you look at Matthew Stafford, remember last year, before the season began, they weren't sure if he'd be ready to go at the start of the season because of the injuries with the back, and it turned out he was okay. But if they have one injury at quarterback, if Stafford were to get hurt at this point in time in his career at his age, then the entire season is going to go down the drains if he misses an extended period of time. So just something to keep in mind if you're looking at the Rams, whether or not they might win the NFC West or, compete for a championship. Health is going to be a key factor for them, particularly at quarterback with Matthew Stafford being at this stage of his career. But if you're Matthew Stafford, you get the new deal, you're coming back next year, you got to feel pretty good, having a front office led by Les Snead and then having a coach like Sean McVay. They're so aggressive in terms of how they want to do everything that they're trying to give you everything you might need to win a championship. And I think that's pretty cool. So there you have it. We'll see how things shake out. But just keep an eye on that. It's not a done deal because of, the age of some of the guys on their roster. But Myles Garrett's just a difference maker. Certain guys come in. I was always told, it's going to baseball for a moment. I still cannot believe that the Atlanta Braves allowed Freddie Freeman to walk and go to the Dodgers. He wanted to be in Atlanta. His family loved Atlanta. He loved being a Brave, and he's a darn good baseball player. Well, what I was told about Freddie Freeman that made him so valuable, and this is something they discovered early on when he was with the Braves, is not only is he a great player and a guy that's going to give you quality at bats, and he's going to make good decisions and be a clutch type guy, but he's one of those guys in the clubhouse where he understands what the vision is, what the mission is, what they're trying to accomplish. And so when younger players come in, Freddie Freeman can kind of take them under their wing and say, this is how we do things here. This is the way we want to do it. This is how we go about our business. And this is what we expect from you. He sets an example with his work ethic and the way he approaches the game. And they allowed that to walk and go to the Dodgers, and he's been great with L.A. But Myles Garrett's the same type of way. I like Myles Garrett a lot. He's got the right attitude and approach. Obviously, he's got incredible talent, one of the best defensive players we've seen in the NFL. So he's going to be a difference maker on the field. And Myles Garrett will be one of those guys where when they get into a key moment in the postseason, you're going to have to account for him. You have to have a game plan for Myles Garrett. If not, you'll get killed because he can completely disrupt an offensive possession. He can take over a game. He can just really annihilate your offense. And you don't want that type of player disrupting an entire game. Game plan, everything. But Myles Garrett's that guy. He's going to work hard. He'll set the tone in practice. He'll show the younger guys how they want to go about their business. And he's going to go out there and perform. And for the Browns, they get a good young player in Jared Verse. And they get draft picks to continue to add to their cupboard. So when it comes time to finding a quarterback, maybe they can get the job done. My guess would be no because of the Browns, and all they do is make, pretty much bad decisions day after day after day, which is why they're always picking up near the top of the draft. But at least they're making good decisions about who they are and where they're at, just like the Rams are. So we'll see. That battle in the NFC West is going to be awesome. Seattle defending their championship, the Rams chasing, trying to get another title with Sean McVay. And you look at that division and the coaching and the quality of players you're going to have to face week in and week out. Think about the coaches in the division right now. Mike McDonald's coming off a Super Bowl win. Sean McVay is one of the best coaches in the game, well-respected. And you got Kyle Shanahan, one of the best coaches in the game and well-respected. And if you're Mike McDonald, a defensive guy, and 4 games per season, you've got to match wits with Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, that's tough. And those 2 games with the Rams and Seahawks last year were classics. So good. Heavy hitters, big-time players. And now Myles Garrett. And I wonder, too, when you look at the division, how happy are guys like Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow knowing that they don't have to worry about Myles Garrett anymore? What, the Browns traded who? Myles Garrett? Thank God. I would get down on my hands and knees and just praise the Lord that I don't have to face Myles Garrett 2 times a year now, every single year, because of the type of player he is. But we'll see. It's easy to pick who's going to win the title now, but as you know, the season plays out. Injuries, the teams that are usually the healthiest at the end of the year are the ones that make the deepest runs. And so health for the Rams is going to be a factor. I might even reach out to Aaron Donald. If you're trying to win a championship, you want to make a run, and you got Myles Garrett coming in, why not reach out to Aaron Donald and see if you can bring him back? And he could play. You don't want to come to training camp, Aaron? No problem. You want to take certain days off? No problem. We just want you on game days. But I would reach out and at least make a phone call. You want to come play with Myles? Can you imagine Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett together on the same defense and the type of problems they would cause? I mean, there are certain players in the league that just wreak havoc. Myles Garrett's one of those guys. But I like what the Rams have done. Aggressive in their mindset. They're in it to win it. And if you're a Rams fan, you got to feel pretty good. It may not work. It may not work, but at least you know that your franchise is doing everything within their power to capitalize on what they have right now. And that's a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Matthew Stafford, a quality player, and you know you've got the roster around him to go out and compete for a championship. So there you have it. We'll see how things shake out. But that'd be my concern about placing a wager down on the Rams to win the championship is just, age and health. And we'll see how it works out throughout the course of the season, but what a tough division that is. I think the AFC West, NFC West, the two best divisions in football, with the Seahawks, the Rams, and the 49ers in the NFC West, the Chargers, the Chiefs, and the Broncos in the AFC West. And you got two bums that sit in the bottom in both divisions in the Raiders, who may be improving, and, of course, the Cardinals, who are the Cardinals. They're one of those teams like the Browns that for most of my life the Cardinals have been garbage. They had a year where they made the postseason with Jake Plummer where they were okay. And then Kurt Warner proved that he's a Hall of Famer by taking the Cardinals to a Super Bowl, which is amazing to me. But for the most part, they've been garbage. And then the Raiders, same thing. They've had a couple of good years. They made it to a Super Bowl. But ever since I was a little boy, the Raiders have been basically a non-factor. And we'll see if those two franchises can turn it around. But I think the NFC West, AFC West, are the two best divisions in football. And Myles Garrett, it's weird. I'm a Broncos fan. And I know for a lot of you fans out there, maybe you're a Raider fan or a 49er fan or a Seahawks fan. Sometimes it's hard to appreciate greatness on different teams, especially teams that maybe have inflicted some pain into you over the years. But there's certain guys that, no matter what team they play for, they're just so good that you just tip the cap. Myles Garrett's one of those players. And I've had different players like that throughout the years. Derek Thomas was a beast of a pass rusher for the Chiefs. I despised him because he was always putting Elway on his back. But he was so good that I just tipped the cap and just appreciated the greatness that he brought to the field when he came out there and played. But in the NFL, what are the most important positions? Quarterback's number one, edge rusher, and left tackle. Are those still the three most important positions in football? And so the Rams, they've got a pretty good roster put together. And Sean McVay's a darn good coach. And if you want to be recuperated as a quarterback and get a second chance, go jump and get with Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay. Amazing that those two guys were on the same staff together in Washington when Mike Shanahan was coaching the Redskins at the time. That's wild to me. All right, telephone number 503-248-0620. As you know, we lost a legend yesterday, Rick Adelman, who passed away at the age of 79. And we talked with the Godfather Dwight Jaynes, who wrote a book with him, was great friends with him, respected him a great deal. And the other guy that covered him for years and years was Kerry Eggers, the Dean of Portland Sports. So we're going to get Kerry's thoughts on Rick and continue to remember him. We'll do that coming up next on the Rip City Drive. I'm live here at Spirt Mountain Casino, getting ready for the Summer Adventures drawings coming up. 7 o'clock is the drawing. It's every Tuesday in the month of June. And I'm sitting out in the BetMGM Sportsbook hanging out right now. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. We'll talk to the Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Eggers, and get his thoughts and memories of the one, the only Rick Adelman coming up next. We lost a legend yesterday. Rick Adelman passed away at the age of 79, and joining us now to discuss is someone that covered him and knew him extremely well. Be sure to check out his website, kerryeggers.com. The Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Eggers, is back on the Rip City Drive. Kerry, good afternoon, and thank you for making time for the show.
Oh, Chad, hi. Thanks for having me on.
Well, Rick Adelman, obviously a legend here in town, but also across the league. I thought it was nice to sit back and look at some of the response that I saw from different coaches, different players over the last 24 hours. And I hope when I pass that I can leave just a fraction of the legacy that Rick Adelman did, not only as a coach or a player in the league, but also as a family man, a father, and a husband. And he had 12 grandchildren. What a legacy, Kerry.
Yeah, I in the last 24 hours, I've talked to a lot of his former players and a couple of his coaches, and the word family man reverberates, and also just the class of the type of person he was. Those two things almost more than his coaching accomplishments, Chad. And here's a guy that's in the Hall of Fame, 10th in the all-time win list. Won the Chuck Daly Lifetime Achievement Award a few years ago, and really, as Adam Silver said in his statement, one of the most respected and accomplished coaches in NBA history.
Yeah, there's no question about it. So for you, for someone that was around him and knew him so well, what are some of the things, memories, and thoughts you've had over the last 24 hours, Kerry?
Well, I started on the Blazer beat at the Oregonian in 1989, and that was his first full year. As you remember, you don't remember, you're too damn young, but the people that were then remember that he was assistant coach for Mike Schuler, who ironically had been the coach of the year in his first year. Second year, he got fired midway through the year. So then Rick takes over, and only is on an interim basis, and then they decided that at the end of the year they were going to give him, I don't know if he got a 1 or 2 year contract. I think Paul still wasn't sold on him, but I remember how great he was to deal with, and I couldn't have broken into the covering the league with a better guy. Just easygoing, a regular guy, not a big shot. Some of the coaches, especially in that era, were big shots, and the two guys that weren't were Jerry Sloan and him, and they were good friends and had played together in Chicago. And so, Rick was a great man and a great coach. And I think he was learning what he needed to do that year. That was the year that they acquired Buck Williams and then added Cliff Robinson in the draft. They had a great 6 to 8 man rotation even that first year, and got to the finals, and then played against a Detroit team that was very seasoned, and I thought they had a chance to beat them, but they didn't. They lost in 5 games, and over those 3 seasons, he made the finals twice, and started to establish himself as a coach that one day would become known as one of the greatest coaches ever.
Yeah, there's no question about it. We're talking with the Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Eggers, remembering Rick Adelman here on the Rip City Drive. What do you think made him so unique to be able to connect with his players? Because all of the guys who played for him really enjoyed being a player under Rick Adelman, enjoyed his approach. But what was it about his ability with people to be able to connect with his players, whether it was a star or a guy at the end of the bench?
Yeah, most of them talked about, thought it was important that he had been a player himself. And even Danny Ainge said that it was good that he hadn't been a star, and that he understood what it took to be an 8th or 9th. Now, he was a starter in Portland for 3 years, but it's a part of his career. He was a backup and never was averaged 7.7 points a game in his 6 or 7 year NBA career. So that part of it, he wasn't the type of guy that would he was able to relate to all those players, and he was laid back. He understood that players needed some time to relax. It wasn't all just about basketball with him. Several of them mentioned that he would talk to them about their lives, and they all had trust. I had Robert Pack called me this morning. He was a rookie in 91, I think, and he said, I came in as an undrafted rookie, and he gave me the confidence to play in the league. So there were several ingredients there, Chad, that led to him just being the perfect guy in Portland. And it was a shame that, in 94, that after they'd, missed the finals, that after they'd made the playoffs but lost in the first round 2 years in a row, Paul decided to pull the plug, and that was a mistake. Jeff Petrie was one of the great general managers, maybe the best ever in Portland, and he resigned because he knew Rick was going to get fired, and they had good teams after that, but I think had they stayed with the group that still wasn't too badly aging, they might have won another title, and they certainly would have had some more success.
Yeah, there's no question. I look back at Paul, and I've got a lot of respect for Paul Allen, but, I mean, that was a definite misstep, to let Rick go. And you look back now and you think, man, if they would have kept Petrie and Rick Adelman, they could have been cooking with something right there.
Clyde had that next year, well, I shouldn't say that. It was 2 years later that he started having knee injuries. But he always was a guy that could still play. He was like Jordan, those guys that get hurt and he'd still be okay. I think Clyde could have helped them for 3 or 4 more years. And of course, the year that they did trade him in the 94-95 season, he goes down to Houston, was a key cog and winning the title. So, yep. You and I think that. Maybe some other people think it was time for him to leave, but I think they should have held the ship together a little bit longer.
Yeah, the one thing I appreciate when you go back and watch some of the games during that era, that 3 years where they were in the finals 2 out of 3 years, I appreciated how hard they played, but also, Kerry, Rick obviously pretty innovative on the offensive end with the way that they moved the basketball and moved bodies and got up and down the floor. And I liked it too because no matter who the 5 were that were on the floor, they all touched the basketball. It was a fun brand of basketball to watch, but very effective.
Yeah, that's another adjective that was used several times. Innovative. They all felt his offenses were, he took advantage of the players that he had, and rather than having a system, he developed a system around the players. For instance, when he was in Portland, you're right, they had some really athletic team and could run the court and did one of the best teams in the league, if not the best at fast break. And then when he went down to Sacramento, he had Chris Webber and Vlade Divac and ran some double post stuff, and that was a very I would say a more technical team that could shoot maybe a little bit better, but didn't run as well. So even later in his career, Chad, when he was at Houston with Yao Ming, he did things around him, and then in Minnesota with Kevin Love. Kevin Love played probably the best ball of his career under Rick. So. The only place where he didn't make it work was Golden State, the first stop that he had after Portland, and he was only there 2 years. He was with Dave Torzik, and I talked to Dave this morning, and it was the makeup of that team with Latrell Sprewell and Tim Hardaway and some of those guys. It just didn't work. So, but other than that, his career was pretty exemplary, I think.
I know you had a chance to speak to Clyde. How was Clyde Drexler's relationship with Rick, and what are some of the things that Clyde said about Coach Adelman?
He described, and by the way, Jen, I'm going to have a story up tonight. If your listeners, get on to kerryeggers.com, you get all this. I talked to about 15 players, I think. Clyde said that his relationship with Rick was as close as a player-coach relationship could be. Clyde came in, Rick came in as an assistant coach his rookie year. And assistant coaches were especially then working with the players, not just during the season, but in the off season. So he was instrumental in developing Clyde's skills. Clyde was an incredible athlete, but maybe not as skilled as a basketball player as he needed to be. And Rick was instrumental in developing that. He liked the fact that Rick was just an easy guy to get along with. And, Clyde had his issues during the time that Jack Ramsey was there. And I think that kind of smoothed out as years went on. But certainly as a young player, Rick was probably kind of an intermediary there with Jack and him. But yeah, no, his relationship with Clyde, Clyde and Rick couldn't have been any better.
Kerry, anyone that watched the 2002 Western Conference Finals with the Kings and the Lakers, especially in Game 6 and Game 7, I don't know how you could walk away without wondering about the officiating. Did he ever express the frustration of being so close to a championship with the Kings, but falling victim to the officiating in those 2 games especially?
Well, I think one time I did right after that happened, that summer, I think I had a conversation with him, and he said, nothing can be proven, but we all think we know what happened. And that's about how he left it. And I think there was that stuck in his craw for probably the rest of his career, that I think that team, had they won the finals or gotten to the finals, they'd have won it and maybe won another one. That's that's kind of how those things go. If you can win one, a lot of times you'll have a chance to win two.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now, most of the people I've spoken with who, covered Rick and were around him and have watched Trailblazer basketball for a long time, that they would say that even though Dr. Jack has the championship, that Rick Adelman's the best coach in Trailblazer franchise history. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to write that, and I have always felt that. And I didn't cover the team, Chad, when Jack was there. I had great respect for him. He was there much longer than Rick, 10 years, and had the one title. But the electricity around that team and during those years that Rick was there, and part of it was the players, admittedly, but I think Rick gets the biggest credit for the job that he did with that group. I think he was the best coach in Blazer history. Terry Stotts is another guy that had a good run too, but he would be the guy that I would put there. And the other thing that is he always considered himself a Portlander. I believe he kept his house all from the time that they moved from Salem to Portland, and I guess it would be '83 when he started working for Jack. I believe they kept their house always, and most of the time it was up in Bull Mountain. They might have been somewhere a little earlier than that. So he considered himself a Portlander. I think he was a part of the fabric of not just the team, but of the city and the community.
What's amazing to me is that he started at Chemeketa College. How about that meteoric rise from Chemeketa to the NBA, Kerry? That's awesome.
That is it. I always think about that. And he stayed there 6 years. It wasn't like he just was there for a year or two. But I think one time I talked to him about that, and he said he developed himself as a coach, and it was good for him to kind of learn about what works with players. And he said, players at all levels have a similar, there's a similar way you need to treat them. And he learned a lot of that stuff. So by the time he got to Portland, he had an idea of what he wanted to do when he was going to be a head coach. And I think he always felt that someday he was going to be one. And sure enough, he got that chance.
I really enjoyed his Hall of Fame speech. Very humble, Kerry. Like, you could just tell that he was overwhelmed with joy to be recognized.
Yeah, I think he was. Well, I'm trying to remember what he said about that. He said that he was surprised and humbled, and as you mentioned, he was a humble guy anyway. It wasn't about him, and he was very confident. He was a very sharp guy, but he wasn't an ego guy. But I do think that was just sort of a tribute that it really hit his heart. And by that time I think he was starting to get a little bit, have some health issues, and unfortunately that sort of the last 3 or 4 years I don't think were very good physically for him.
Kerry, you mentioned this, that you started, on the beat at the time that Rick Adelman became coach, and he was very helpful. How much did being around him and his willingness to communicate with you and be so open, how much did that help you really understand and start to learn the NBA game?
A lot, and it wasn't just him. It was also John Wetzel and Jack Shallow. They only had 2 assistants in those years, Chad. And I traveled with them for 3 years and got to know him personally. Jack Shallow got to know my son Troy and had him out at his ranch a couple of times because he knew he liked horses and stuff. And Jack was a horse guy. Wetzel, I still talk to John. Those guys were just salt of the earth people, and it was not an adversarial thing. I mean, you weren't a part of the team, but you were a guy that was covering, and they respected the job you had to do. And if I needed to call Rick, he would call me back, and he would either answer the phone or call me back. And it was the same. And I don't know if too many coaches are that way now. There's so much media and everything. It was a different era then, and I was very fortunate that those guys were the guys, because not all the coaches were that cooperative. He knew what his role was, and he knew what our role was. He respected us just like we respected him.
That's great. We're talking with the Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Eggers. He's going to have a piece up on Rick Adelman, remembering him later on this evening at kerryeggers.com. You can check out. How happy was he to see his son become a head coach in the NBA? Did you ever get a chance to talk to him about that?
Oh yeah. He loved to talk about that. And he gave David his start as kind of an intern, a workout guy in Minnesota. And, David had come from he come from the Lincoln High School, and that he'd done a great job at Lincoln High School. I think he got in the state finals, and so he wasn't exactly NBA versed. However, he'd grown up around the league because he was a student of the game when he was a little kid. So he was very excited, not only about David, but RJ, his other son, who tragically died in a car accident. But he was on the member of the executive staff at Minnesota for several years too, and so Rick was very proud of all 6 of his kids, and including Kathy, who was a fantastic coach, a high school coach, girls high school coach in this state for many years too. So, I mean, he whenever we talked in his later years, he told you, I got to go to a grandkids game, and I think he had a dozen grandkids, and a lot of them were athletes. His life over his last probably 10 years since he retired in 2014 was being around his kids, being around his grandkids, and just really enjoying that.
That's pretty awesome. We're talking with Kerry Eggers. I got one final question for you, Kerry. Did you talk to any former players from the other teams, whether it be Golden State or Minnesota or Houston or Sacramento, aside from just Trailblazers, in your efforts to put your piece together tonight? No, but I did talk to Jim Barnett, who played with Rick for 3 years. Played with him in the for the San Diego Rockets when Rick's first 2 years in the NBA, and then he was an original, as you know, with the Blazers in '77. Yes.
Jim was the guy who Bill Schonley had the Rip City shot. He had the shot that started the Rip City fad for the Blazers, and it was interesting to talk to Jim about that. He said, he wasn't a great player, but I said, well, are you surprised at what a great coach he became? Absolutely not. He said he was built to be a coach, and if anybody reads my story, they'll see what else he has to say about it.
That's great. And Jim Barnett's a beauty to talk to. I love him to death. He's so much fun.
He's a character. I love Jim.
But Kerry, think about how many guys in the league.
I'd like to mention. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, think about all the guys in the league that have become great coaches that were just ordinary basketball players. They weren't stars. There's a lot of guys like that, like Rick.
Well, George Karl was one. He wasn't a great player, and you're right. There's several players, several guys that had careers but weren't great players that became good coaches.
Yes, no question. All right, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
Well, I just wanted you've been supportive of my book, Skulls of the Score Scribe. We've got a big event Saturday night Saturday during the afternoon, from 2 to 4, Bravuro Cellars Winery in Amity, Steve Saxon's place, and it's an open to the public. Mike Parker is going to be the moderator. Mike Riley will be there. Craig Hanneman, who played in the NFL, played at Oregon State, and then became a world-class mountain climber. All of us are going to be there. Mike's going to kind of lead a talk. We'll have wine tasting. We'll have my books available. We'll talk a little bit about the book. Both of those guys, Chad, as you know, are in the stories on Mike and Craig are in the book. So I think it's going to be a fun. The public is invited, and I hope some of your listeners will come up and join us.
You get double Mike. You get Parker and Riley. That's a good afternoon right there. Doesn't get any better than that.
That's a great afternoon. Yeah, and Mike couldn't do it if he wouldn't have been able to do it if the Beavers had not lost in the regional. So there was a silver lining to that.
Well, good. Well, Kerry Eggers, make sure you check out his website. His piece on Rick Adelman will be up later on this evening at kerryeggers.com. Hey, Kerry, I love you to death. Thank you so much for taking time to talk about the great Rick Adelman, who obviously had such a tremendous impact on so many people in the area, and a tremendous coach and a great family man as well. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts.
I'll always be good to be on with you. Thanks, Chad.
There you go. There's Kerry Eggers. Pretty awesome. I mean, just like Dr. Jack kind of taught Dwight the game, and he learned so much from him. Same thing with Kerry Eggers, who started on the beat. Rick Adelman was coach, and he learned so much from Rick, who was open and willing to answer questions and everything. That's pretty sweet. All right, we'll keep things rolling. Hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday afternoon. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, Rip City Radio 620. All right, you can jump on board 503-248-0620. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. Jump on board. You got to share any thoughts, you can do so. Big thanks to Kerry Eggers, the Dean of Portland Sports, for joining the show to share thoughts about the great Rick Adelman. And pretty much everyone that covered the team, that's been around the team for an extended period of time, would acknowledge that he's probably the best coach in franchise history. If you want to say that Dr. Jack is the best coach in franchise history, I have no issue with that. But what Rick Adelman did with those teams in the early 90s, 3 straight years where the Blazers were either the best or right at the top of the NBA, 2 NBA finals, and they just ran into 2 buzzsaws. It sucks. Very annoying, I might add. But I'm trying to think back to that 1990 NBA Finals, Blazers and Pistons. I don't think I thought that Portland was going to win the series going in. You know, I had respect for the Pistons and the way they defended. Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars went off, and then it was freaking the microwave Vinnie Johnson who hit that ridiculous shot in Game 5 over Jerome Kersey to seal up the series, and they won it in 5. The most shocking part about the series was Portland winning that ridiculous game number 2 in Detroit at the Palace of Auburn Hills. So they come back to Portland tied up at 1 game apiece, and then they lost 3 straight games on their home floor. Like, I did not expect that to happen. It didn't even get back to Detroit, which is crazy to me. I just remember Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars going off in that series. And Joe Dumars lost his father during that series. Bill Laimbeer had 6 threes. He was the original, like, perimeter shooting center. He had 6 threes in game number 2, and Portland still won that game in extra time, which is amazing. So it was a highly contested series, but Detroit, they were the experienced team. They went back-to-back. And then the next year, that's probably the year where they would have had an even better chance or their best chance to win a title. They couldn't even get out of the West. They lost to the freaking Lakers in 6 games in the Western Conference Finals in 91. I went back and watched that game for some dumb reason the other night, and I got to watch Clifford Robinson drop the ball off his hands out of bounds, and they lose that game, and Magic throws the ball very annoyingly down the floor, and time runs out. It's pretty amazing if you look back over the course of your life as a sports fan and how many different scars have been left behind by your favorite teams. And we're talking about deep scars, and some of them you never recover from. And unfortunately for Blazer fans, a lot of those scars are a result of the stupid Lakers. Magic throwing his ball down the court, time runs out, game over, and the Lakers go to the NBA Finals. And then, of course, the fourth quarter meltdown in 2000 and that Kobe lob to Shaq. That was pretty good. Really good memories. Really deep scars, by the way. But that team, I wonder, had they gotten to the finals after having been there against Detroit, you get there in 91, which was the Bulls' first year where they won the championship, first time MJ was in the finals, how would they have fared in that series? Because by the time they got back to the finals in 92 and the Bulls were on their way to a repeat, I did not think that the Blazers were going to win that series going in. And they ran into freaking MJ and the Bulls. And the game 1, too, the MJ was 6 threes in the first half and went for 30-plus in the first half. That series was annoying. Blazers won game 2. They come back to Portland. Chicago takes 2 of the 3 games at the Coliseum, and they win it in 6. You know, what can you do sometimes? The loss to the Lakers in 91, inexcusable. But the 2 finals losses to Detroit and Chicago, it's understandable. You know, they ran into 2, of the best teams in history right there. It is what it is. But Rick Adelman was great. His teams were fun to watch. He was very innovative with the offense and the way he put his guys in a position to succeed. And, frankly, he gave me some great memories. And you as well. He gave us all great memories. Those teams played the right way. They played really hard. They were talented. Their starting 5 was terrific. The way he developed Clifford Robinson off the bench. A lot of things to like about that team. I think it was Dwight yesterday that mentioned that they turned Kevin Duckworth into that pick and pop type player where he was able to square up from the elbow and knock down shots. So there you have it. But I would say I would put those teams right there. Sean in Damascus said, I was sick for a week after that Laker loss in 2000. It actually really screwed me up. Maybe even still. Michael Jordan's flu game was against the Knicks. No, that was against the Jazz. The flu game that everyone talks about with MJ was Game 5 of the 97 finals against Utah. You remember they played Utah in back-to-back years, 97 and 98. The flu game was 97, Game 5 in Utah at the Delta Center. You know, the Bulls had won the first 2 games of that series, and then Utah won the next 2 games, and they had the all-pivotal Game 5 that Chicago was able to win, and then they went back home and won it in 6. And there you have it. Who was it? Was that Steve Kerr in Game 6 of that series? And then they rematched in 98, and the Bulls won that series. So, but, yeah, Rick Adelman he's great. Great coach, and not just in Portland. But you talk to people in Sacramento, they acknowledge he's the best coach in franchise history there. So great success in Sacramento, nearly won a championship, but got punked by the officials. Nearly won a title in Portland, and had tremendous success in Minnesota and Houston. And Kerry made the point that Kevin Love played his best basketball as a pro under Rick Adelman. All right, 503-248-0620. I wanted to share this. This is actually pretty ridiculous. Let's see if I can find it for you. But the Rams, you know, a lot of teams, you want to draft well, you want to develop, you want to put your team in a position to have great success. The Rams pretty much give a middle finger to that entire idea. So this is what the Rams have done. This is what being all in is. This is the Rams' first-round picks since 2016. In 2016, the Rams drafted Jared Goff and eventually traded him in the Matthew Stafford deal. No first-round picks in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 2023. In 2024, they drafted Jared Verse, who they traded yesterday in the Myles Garrett deal. No first-round picks in 2025. And this year they picked Ty Simpson in the first round. That's 1, 2, 3. 3 first-round picks since 2016 for the Rams. Only one of them, Ty Simpson's on the team, and they are the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl. So the Rams they're just like, here are the chips. Just slide them, just push them all in. A big pile of chips right into the middle of the table. Let's just gamble it. Who gives a rip about draft picks? We're trying to win championships. Crazy. All right, we'll keep things rolling. You got the Rip City Drive with Chad doing 503-248-0620 here on your home of the Blazers, Rip City Radio 620. All right, NBA Finals kickoff tomorrow night down in San Antonio. The Spurs and Knicks. New York on fire. They've won 11 straight games in the postseason, but have played just 4 games since the 10th of May. Spurs favored by 5 in game number 1. Tom Dundon's quest for a championship is about to kick off. The Stanley Cup Finals at the Lenovo Center in Raleigh Hurricanes and the Las Vegas Golden Knights. You can watch that game on ABC. Mariners are hoping to make it 8 straight wins. Game 2 against the Mets coming up tonight from T-Mobile Park at 6:40. Logan Gilbert gets a call for Seattle. Aaron Judge out of the lineup tonight for the Yankees, dealing with a bone bruise, which is causing some discomfort in his shoulder. Jose Caballero will get the start in the outfield in his place. More of the Rip City Drive with Chad Doing coming at you right now. All right, I've been in interaction with a couple of different people. Let's clear up some historical sports facts. So the Michael Jordan flu game was not against the Knicks in the playoffs. That was in the NBA Finals, well documented in the Last Dance documentary. But he had the flu in Game 5 of the 97 Finals against the Utah Jazz with the series tied up at 2. MJ went wild even though he had the flu, and put up the points necessary to get Chicago the win, and they went back to Chicago and won that series the next game, which was game number 6. So I don't know if it was the flu. Did he get bad pizza? Some people suggest it was food poisoning. Michael was sick, and visibly so, but the flu game was game 5 of the 97 NBA Finals. Also, it was not John Paxson that hit the shot for Chicago. You got to keep the years straight. So in 1997, Game 6, after Chicago and Utah went back to the Windy City, it was Steve Kerr from Michael Jordan who hit the game-winning shot to clinch the series for Chicago. But if you go back to 1993, that was the year that Charles Barkley won MVP, and the Phoenix Suns were the best team in the NBA, best record. They had home court advantage throughout. So it was the Bulls and the Suns in the NBA Finals. And a bizarre series where Chicago won the first 2 games on the road in Phoenix. They go back home to Chicago. They lose 2 out of 3, and Chicago's got a 3-2 series lead going back to Phoenix for Game 6. Now, in that game, it was highly contested. I went back and watched that one recently. It was John Paxson from Horace Grant who hit the game winner in that Game 6 in Phoenix, which clinched the first three-peat for the Chicago Bulls. So John Paxson hit the game-winning shot in Game 6 of the 93 Finals, Bulls and Suns, and it was Steve Kerr who hit the game-winning shot in Game 6 in the series clincher against the Utah Jazz in the 97 Finals. So there you have it. That should straighten that out. And, you know, it's sometimes, you know, I'll tell you what's happening as time goes on. I've got so many games and so many players and so many different plays that are jammed into my memory banks that a lot of times the details get a little bit fuzzy. This is why I love YouTube, because I can go back and pull up a lot of times the game or the play that I'm thinking about to make sure it's how I remembered it. But 2 of the best sports resources on the internet are Basketball Reference and Pro Football Reference, 2 of the greatest websites of all time. What's great about Pro Football Reference is you can go back to any year that's been played in the league, and you can pull up the season, you can pull up your team, and you can look back at each individual game. And they got box scores for every single game your team has played. And so a lot of times, if I'm trying to remember certain things about the Broncos or certain seasons or players, I can go back through Pro Football Reference and be able to pull up the season, the player, and pull up those type of details. I also think it's fun sometimes to go through the box scores on different games that you've gone to and I've done that over the years too, just to remember certain details about the games, because it's hard to remember as time goes on, all the exact things that went down. But I like to do that for games I've been to live, like games that were really exciting or big-time football games. I like to go back and look at some of the details on those games. Some of those games are available on YouTube, but some of them aren't. But it's nice to go back and reread some of the details of the game, because you can be like, oh, I forgot about that play or that player, or that guy had this many points, or this guy scored that many touchdowns. It's pretty amazing to look back upon. And there are certain games that have a lot of meaning to me. Like for me, one of my favorite things to do when I was younger, when we moved out here to the Northwest, the Broncos and Seahawks were in the same division. And so every year I would head down to G.I. Joe's, and I would wait in line at Ticketmaster when the NFL tickets went on sale, and I'd get a pair of tickets for the Broncos-Seahawks game up at Kingdome. A couple of years it was at Husky Stadium, but I'd get a pair of tickets for the game so me and my dad could go together. The first year in '89, that was the first time I'd went to a Broncos-Seahawks regular season game at the Kingdome. I went, and I mentioned this story, I went on the train from Vancouver up to Seattle with me and my buddy Jeff. We were both 14 at the time, and our parents allowed us to ride the train up to Seattle, go to the game, and come back home. Pretty amazing. It's one of the best days of my life. It was so much fun. So I remember that. The next year in 1990, my dad and I drove up to Seattle and went to the game. And that game's on YouTube, and it was a crazy game because the Seahawks won the game 17-12. But the crazy part about that game, and I pulled it up on YouTube to see if I can remember it, and the Broncos had the ball right around midfield, but they needed a touchdown to win, but time was running out. So their best option was to heave the ball 4 straight Hail Marys. And they had one, the final one, Elway threw it about 60-plus yards in the air, and he got it high up in the air, like the typical type of jump ball that you want in the end zone. And it got tipped around, and Michael Young caught the ball in the back of the end zone, and it should have won the game, but there was a flag on the play for illegal motion. And when you go back and watch it, it was pretty clear that one of the Bronco receivers, I think it might have been either Mark Jackson or Vance Johnson, they were in motion towards the line of scrimmage when the ball was snapped. So it was the right call. But I was pretty excited for like 5 seconds because I thought the Broncos had pulled off a miraculous win. But I like to go back and look at those games because I remember them so well because I was with my dad, which is a lot of fun. And a lot of times what will happen is people will post these old games I've been waiting to see on YouTube. And so I can go back and watch a lot of those games up at the Kingdome or on YouTube so I can watch that. But I like going back through and looking at the box score. The first game I went to at the Coliseum, Blazers and Nuggets, and Michael Adams put up 34 points. It was actually a game that Denver won 136-127 late in the season before the Blazers made their first run to the finals with Rick Adelman as head coach. But things like that. I saw the Blazers and Nuggets in Denver in 1988. Blazers won that game, but it was a game where both Clyde Drexler and Alex English went off. So, again, just websites that can help with details. I do want to talk about the NBA Finals. I'll get to my prediction tomorrow. I do think this is going to be a highly competitive NBA Final because I think the Knicks match up pretty well. A couple of the keys that we've talked about today. Number one, the Knicks have more size. The Thunder relied on smaller guards who could switch, to operate their defense. And Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle, because they're so physically strong, bigger guards, they're able to, just push their way into the paint and get shots right at the rim. They could play bully ball on the smaller Thunder guards. But now they're going to be matched up with bigger, longer defenders who are more stout, guys like OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges. And that's going to make life more difficult on the Spurs guards. Of course, it's going to come down to Wembanyama. We know what happened the last series. In the games where he decided to be dominant in the paint and set a tone early, they won. In the 3 games they lost, Game 1, Game 3, and Game 5, he was relegated to being a mid-range player, not aggressive, not in the paint, and not being a difference maker there. And those are the games that Thunder won. So it's pretty clear that, between the mindset of Victor Wembanyama, his coaching staff, and his teammates, they've got to make a concerted effort along with Wembanyama's, determination to make sure that he's living in the paint and making life tough on both ends for the Knicks in that type of position. But it's about him, being physical, getting into position, and attacking. And when he plays like that, they're nearly impossible to beat because there's not really no one that has an answer for him. But keep an eye on this number here as the series plays out. Look at his shot quality. Where is his shot? Where are Wemby's shots coming from? Are they coming from the paint area, or is he settling for threes because the Knicks have been able to push him away from the basket? That's going to be critical. Wembanyama's aggressiveness, his mindset, and the type of game he wants to play in combination with his teammates looking to get him in a position to score in the paint is going to be critical. Also, Wembanyama's assignment on defense. He's probably going to be put on Josh Hart the majority of the time, and the reason why you would do this, just like they did with Alex Caruso in the Thunder series. Now, Caruso made them pay. They put Wemby on Caruso so that Wemby could be freed up to be able to roam and be a rim protector and create havoc on defense, which he does. But as a result, Caruso hit 61% of his threes in the first 3 games, and the Thunder were up 2-1. They're going to put him on Josh Hart because Josh Hart has struggled mightily to be able to make three-point shots throughout the course of the postseason. He did a great job. He had his best season, 42% from 3 during the regular season, and that's a really good number. He hit 49% from the corners during the regular season. But in the postseason, only 31% from 3 and 36% from the corners. So why wouldn't you dare him to shoot? So it's going to be important for Josh Hart to make some threes and get closer to that percentage he had during the regular season, especially from the corners, because you've got to find a way to draw Wemby away from the basket. And if Josh Hart's going to be left alone and he doesn't make shots, that's going to allow Wemby to create havoc with his length and his defense and his rim protection. So keep that in mind, and we'll see how that works. Now, Karl Anthony Towns is going to be key because if Wemby is forced to go to Karl Anthony Towns, meaning if the Spurs put a smaller guy if they put a smaller guy on Karl Anthony Towns, someone like Champagnie, and Towns starts to become a problem where he's able to put the ball on the floor and attack the rim and get easy buckets inside, then they're going to have to make an adjustment, and they'll probably use Wemby. But that could be critical because you have to respect Towns' ability to shoot the three, and that would bring Wemby away from the basket. So the Knicks are going to need guys to continue to make shots like we've seen throughout their playoff run because you've got to put pressure on Wemby to get him away from the basket. If guys don't hit threes and he's allowed to just sit back there and rim protect, they're going to be in big trouble. And I think it's also going to be a real challenge. I love Jalen Brunson, his ability to get to his spots and get a shot off. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch to see how crafty Brunson can be against physical guards like Castle and Harper. And Brunson being undersized, how will he fare against those guys? All right, 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. It is Hops Ticket Tuesday here on the Rip City Drive. Yes, last week was the first Tuesday, and every Tuesday throughout the baseball season, because I care about people, we're going to give you a chance to get out to Hops Ballpark and check out some baseball, which is going to be critical. So I want you to do that. I want you to experience that, and I want you to have a chance to enjoy some baseball. So today we got a 4-pack of tickets for the Hops, who are going to take on Tri-Cities on Craft Beer Night, and that's going to be Thursday, June 11th, a week from Thursday. So if you would like a 4-pack of tickets for the Hops on Craft Beer Night to watch them check out Tri-Cities or take on Tri-Cities, we'll take caller 10 right now, 503-248-0620. 503-248-0620. Fire away with your phone calls right now. Caller 10 will get a 4-pack of tickets for the Hops. Brendan will take your call. We will get your information, and you'll be dialed in. 503-248-0620. Call now! If you want a 4-pack of tickets for the Hops a week from Thursday, call now, 503-248-0620. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, Rip City Radio 620. Boy, this is a really interesting stat as we get ready for the NBA Finals coming up tomorrow night, Game 1 in New York. Since Victor Wembanyama was drafted, there are 20 players who have defended him for at least 100 half-court matchups. The player he has tallied the fewest player points per 100 matchups against as his primary assignment is OG Anunoby. That's pretty impressive. I think one of the big keys, and it's been a key throughout the course of the NBA Finals, and Brad Botkin brings this up. Who's going to survive the non-Wemby minutes? In the conference finals, the Spurs outscored the Thunder by 62 points across 7 games when Wembanyama was on the floor. When Wemby was off the floor, they were outscored by 36. That is a 98-point swing or 14 points per game. And for the entirety of the playoffs, the Spurs are plus 188 when Wemby is on the floor. They're minus 3 without him. So obviously it's going to be an important part of the series because if you're the Knicks, you're going to want to make the most of those opportunities. And for San Antonio, they're going to look to do the best they can to get, the advantage. Big leads, and then hopefully when that second unit comes in with Luke Cornett, that they don't fall behind or completely damage the work that was done by the starters. But that's a big number. They outscored the Thunder by 62 points across the 7 games in the series when Wemby was on the floor. They were outscored by 36 when he was off. That's a big swing. So, needless to say, Wembanyama and how he approaches the game, how the Knicks deal with him, and when he's off the floor, everything about Wemby is going to be the key factor, right? Anunoby is one heck of a defender. He's one of those guys where he doesn't have the name recognition, that some of the star players do, but I just love watching him play. His physicality, his energy, he's definitely a 3-and-D type player. I think it's great. So we'll see what Wembanyama is going to be able to do. Is he going to be able to roll? Is he going to be able to catch on the move and get downhill? And what about when he's faced up against Anunoby? 3-point line or at the elbow? What's he going to be able to do? The real challenge for Wemby right now is just he doesn't have that go-to move. And so there are times where he's looking to move off the bounce or attack the paint where it gets a little bit clumsy. But again, that's just now, right? What's going to happen over the next 2 or 3 years as he continues to figure the game out? It's going to be pretty darn scary because he's so dominant. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. They have introduced the players. They have done the anthems. And now Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals getting ready to kick off. Tom Dundon looking to get a championship with the Hurricanes. Carolina and Las Vegas, Game 1 tonight. And the NBA Finals will kick off tomorrow. Kerry Eggers told me he'll have that piece up on Rick Adelman on his website, kerryeggers.com, coming up a little bit later tonight. I think he said the number of players. He talked to 14 former players who had a chance to play for Rick Adelman as he was putting this piece together. So it'll be nice to get some insight and perspective from those guys who had a chance to play for him. But Clyde Drexler loved him. Clyde Drexler respected him. They had a good relationship. And what Dwight told us yesterday, if you remember, is that Jack Ramsey, really tried to, keep Clyde Drexler under control. Wanted him to do it his way, play a certain way, and that created frustration. And so what Rick learned from that is that he was going to let Clyde be Clyde. And so when he got the opportunity to be head coach and took over, he took the leash off of Clyde and just let him go out and do his thing. And it paid off pretty well. And, Clyde Drexler is one of those guys where you want him to be unbridled. Clyde, you go do you. Watching Clyde in the open floor and, playing free was awesome. And Clyde could do everything. He could run the floor. He was great in transition. He could score one-on-one, very underrated rebounder. He was just a unique basketball player. And he's one of those guys like MJ who played above the rim. And he looked so graceful when he was out there attacking, in transition. And those guys that can, palm the ball and hold the ball, it's no problem. It's just amazing to me. Carolina has scored almost as soon as the game started. It's 1-0 Carolina, and the crowd is in a frenzy waving their towels. So the towels didn't work with the Trailblazers, but Dundon's got the towels working for the fans in Carolina. I mean, right out of the gate, they go down and get an opportunity and score on a breakaway. That's pretty awesome. Wow. That's a fast start for the Hurricanes. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. You know, the other interesting question, too, is, you know, the Knicks, they've pretty much been on fire ever since about Game 4 of the Hawks series. Like, no matter who's shooting the basketball, they're making shots. And they have the ability to score from anywhere on the court. During the regular season, the Knicks ranked outside the top 10 in restricted area attempts, paint attempts, mid-range attempts, and three-point attempts per game. What that means is it's a good thing. They have an elite offense that can't be narrowed down to a couple of spots on the floor. They have led the playoffs in shots inside the restricted area and paint points per game at 53, up from 47 in the regular season. Hard to see that continuing against San Antonio with Victor Wembanyama, but we'll see. You know, the Spurs, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander saw his layup attempts basically cut in half against San Antonio in the Western Final, and he was forced into heavy jump shots. He only converted 41% in the series, down from 55 in the regular season. So the question is, you know, what is Jalen Brunson going to be able to do? Now, Brad Bakken says that Jalen Brunson may be better suited than SGA to score effectively against San Antonio. And Bakken says he's better, or at least more comfortable at volume pull-up three-point shots. And overall, the Knicks are lights out three-point shooting. During the regular season, they ranked fourth in three-point percentage, and in the playoffs, they're making 40% of their threes. What about Mikal Bridges? Is he going to stay hot? But, I mean, if his mid-range followaways are going in, it's going to be more challenging for Wemby. And just a lot of things to look at this series. All right, Sean in Damascus has chimed back in. He says, should be a little bit excited that our new owner has his hockey team in the Stanley Cup Finals. Hopefully that's a good sign for our Blazers, who are going to be following the same path eventually. Well, I mean, that's been my point all along about Tom Dundon. You know, everyone's sounding the alarm and telling me what Tom Dundon's all about. It's not like he's an unknown quantity. I mean, look at what he's done in Carolina, and this is what gets me excited about, you know, the tenure. First off, let's just recap this real quick. So the Blazers, up until Tom Dundon took over, were run by a trust with Jody Allen and Bert Colt. It's never a good thing for your team to be run by a trust long term, because their primary focus is to get the team in order to be able to make the sale. So they're not necessarily focused on what's coming up 5 or 10 years down the road. They're focused on the here and now because they're trying to get the team ready to sell. So it's good to have someone in charge, in place, that's got a vision and is aggressive and wants to win. Now, I've already given my basic definition of what you want in an owner. You want someone who wants to win and someone that's willing to put their resources into making that happen. And Tom Dundon's already said on multiple occasions that when it comes to the players, he's not going to have a budget. You know, he's going to tighten up things on the business side the way he sees fit, which he's already starting to do. But when it comes to the players, he's not going to have a budget. So he's got the basic desire of wanting to win, being ultra competitive, and having a willingness to spend to make that happen. So that's a very good thing. But look at the track record. He took over Carolina, and that was a franchise that was a complete mess. It was a disaster. And slowly but surely, he's built it back up to where now they're one of the perennial powers in the NHL. I think they made the playoffs in every single season since he's taken over as owner. And now they're on the verge of possibly winning a championship. And the stands are packed with fans who are excited about the Hurricanes. So, again, the NHL is not the NBA. They're different. And he's going to have to learn some of the nuances and differences between the two leagues. But when you have someone who's successful and proven that he can get it done in sports, and someone that's got a vision, someone that's aggressive, someone that's very competitive, I mean, those are all the elements you want in an owner. So I have, you know, like I said, I think this is a time where we should be excited as Trailblazer fans, not gripping about, you know, this, that, or the other thing. I understand people's fear about the team leaving. I do not think that's going to happen. I didn't think it 4 or 5 years ago. I don't think it now. I think they're going to get the deal done. The arena will get the renovations that are required and needed, and the Blazers are going to be here long term. That's what I truly think is going to happen. And with Tom Dundon and the decisions he's making about limiting some staff members and, going about things a certain way, time will tell. But right now it's too early to make any bold judgments about Tom Dundon. But what we do know is the one sports team that he does run, they've been nothing but successful ever since he's taken over. And he's changed the entire culture there. He was able to work with local officials. They're building up the area around the arena. He was able to get a new lease done. So, he's been through this process before. So, that's a good thing. So he's not an unknown quantity. We know what he's about. Carolina right now up on Vegas, 1-0 in the first period. NBA Finals will kick off tomorrow. The Mariners trying to make it 8 straight. They host the Mets again tonight at T-Mobile Park. That first pitch will be at 6:40, and Logan Gilbert is going to be on the call or on the mound for the Mariners. He gets the call to pitch. Just looking at what's going on in baseball right now, the hottest team in baseball, you've got the Mariners who have won 7 straight, and they are the hottest team in baseball right now, today. Now, that could change in a heartbeat, but the Mariners right now a 2.5-game lead on the Rangers in the American League West. They've won 7 straight games and playing some pretty good baseball. But the teams that are right up there near the top, the Dodgers in the West at 38-22, the Braves in the East at 40-20, and the Brewers playing good baseball in the Central at 36-21. The other 2 divisions, Tampa Bay's been hot of late. They lead New York by 1 in the East at 36-21, and the Guardians on top in the AL Central at 34-27. But I like where the Mariners are at. They went through that rough patch, and now they've been able to turn it around and get things going in the right direction. Also, I think it was Steve. Congratulations to Steve, who won the 4-pack of tickets for the Hops. We'll do Hops Ticket Tuesday every Tuesday on the Rip City Drive, but Steve told Brendan that he has not been to a Hops game yet at the new ballpark, and he's excited about it. And, Steve, I would recommend get there, give yourself enough time when you get there to walk around the ballpark, to check everything out that's on the inside, the food offerings, and then make sure you walk around the park and go out to the outfield. Like, the entire setup is really impressive. And when you pull into the parking lot and you're walking up the steps to the new ballpark, it looks beautiful. Like, it really is awesome. And it's pretty neat that Hillsborough was able to pull that off. And the work by their general manager, Cale Wambacher, and his entire team and all the different people that made contributions to work with state legislators to get that done is pretty awesome. But the ballpark it's beautiful. Now, for me, I'm hoping to get out and enjoy some more Hop games this summer. I think for a lot of you, my daughter, her school ends at the end of this week. She's got a couple more days with finals. Friday's the final day, and then summertime will hit, which is going to be nice. And that'll give me some time to get out to the ballpark a little bit, which is going to be good. But this weather we're having right now is spectacular. The morning golf has been great. I got the tournament coming up at Willamette Valley Country Club this weekend. It's going to be on Saturday and Sunday. And hopefully I can shake off the putting miscues the last couple of days. Gosh, there's nothing worse than striking the ball well, putting yourself in a position, and just completely going Mitchell Robinson on the greens. And there's nothing worse than standing over a ball and having zero confidence. Because, like today, I missed like 4 to 5 short birdie putts, and then I missed like 4 short par putts. It's just missed opportunities all over the place. It's like, what are you doing, you moron? Oh, my gosh. That's not the type of feel you want going into a tournament. And what I like about Nancy, who I'm going to play with, Dwight's wife, the Godfather, she's very competitive. And she's a classic. She's a very good athlete. She's a classic overachiever. She's great at everything she does, and she takes her golf game very seriously. And she's fun to be out on the course with because her and I are the same. We're not real chatty out there on the golf course, but I like her mindset and her determination. It's very good. But I like this matchup in the finals. I'll give my prediction tomorrow, but, I wouldn't have thought going into the playoffs that the Knicks were going to make the finals. I'm not surprised based on the Eastern Conference, but I would have picked Boston over them. But here the Knicks are, And I wouldn't have thought that the Knicks would have a chance to match up and win a championship, but I think now, based on what we've seen and the way they match up with the Spurs, they've got a chance to win the title. If you would have told me that before the playoffs began, I would have said you were crazy. But they got a legitimate chance. And like I mentioned before, I just like watching them play. I like this team. I like teams that are well-connected and they play for one another. Where, and the Spurs are the same way. Like, they're definitely Wembanyama's team. Like, he's the guy, but he's willing to share the basketball. He encourages his teammates. Both teams, play for each other. They're well-connected, and they're getting the job on both ends. So I think that's going to make for a compelling series. I'm sure the league is probably thrilled beyond belief to have the Knicks in and being the New York market, but also having, one of the game's biggest stars, the alien Victor Wembanyama. And what's cool about this is that, for a lot of these guys, it's their first taste of the NBA Finals. So, this is where, players start to make a name for themselves. Is that going to be Victor Wembanyama? Like, is this going to be title number one of a serious run over the next decade where he's going to be back in the NBA Finals multiple times? Is that what's about to take off? Or is Jalen Brunson going to make himself a New York legend by leading his team to a championship? Like, that's pretty amazing. And how crazy is that if Brunson leads his team to a title, that he would get one, and Patrick Ewing, who was so close for such a long period of time, never got the deal done based on the time that he played and the fact that he couldn't get through MJ and the Bulls. And then when MJ stepped away and they finally got through, they couldn't get over the hump in the finals against Houston. They had that 3-2 lead going back to Houston. They lose both games on the road, and they drop the series. Like, that's crazy to me. So I like the legacies. Carolina up on Vegas 1-0 right now. First period of Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals. And for those of you who don't know, Tom Dundon, owner of the Trailblazers, is also owner of the Carolina Hurricanes. All right, 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. We'll come back. I appreciate your time. Hope you're enjoying your Tuesday right here on your home of the Blazers, Rip City Radio 620. I played golf with a really nice gentleman this morning. I think he's retired now. He works, a few days out at Heron Lakes. A lot of the old guys, they're geniuses. They retire, and then they get a couple of days of work at a golf course for the free golf. That's like the ultimate retirement plan. Here, I'll do this for a day or two, work a few hours, and get free golf. It's not a bad gig if you can get it, but this guy, Donnell Smith, he's got like a cool first name, Donnell, which is very uncommon, but the most common last name in the history of the world, in Smith. But we were talking, and I've seen him out there a ton, and we talk, and he's very friendly, and we talk sports, and he's grown up in the area and been around here for a long time, so he's always a pleasure to be around. Always in a good mood, always smiling, very polite. But I had a chance to play with him this morning for the first time, and we just had a wonderful time on the course together. But he told me, I didn't find out until the end of the round, but 50 years ago he won the Oregon Amateur, which is pretty awesome. Like, that's a pretty big feat. So we were talking about that, and I was giving him congratulations on that because I didn't know. But I asked him, I said, Donnell, like, how do you spell it? Is that Donnell? And he said, yep. And I said, I don't know many Donnells. I said, I know Donnell Bennett, who was a fullback / running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he told me, he goes, I know all the athletes with the first name Donnell. And he goes, we Donnells have to stick together. So he personally roots on other Donnells because it's such a unique name. And so I thought that was pretty funny. So I know Donnell Bennett, who played for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think he went to the University of Miami. He was also aware of him. Donnell Wittenberg, who was an American artistic gymnast and a member of the U.S. men's national team, notable for his gold medal on the rings in the World Championships. You've got Larry Donnell, which doesn't count because Donnell's not his first name. He was a tight end and spent the majority of his career with the Giants. Donnell Thompson, who was a defensive end who played for the Baltimore and Indianapolis Colts. And Donnell Wolford, who was a corner, and he played the majority of his career with the Bears, who I remember. So Donnell Bennett, also Donnell Washington, a professional defensive tackle. So there are a few Donnells, but I think that's kind of neat to have a name that's not real common. Like Chad, for whatever reason, Chad has some negative connotations on it now, like Karen, which I don't like. But Chad is similar, where it's not a super common name, but Donnell's kind of a cool name. I was talking with Brendan. I was coming back. So I mentioned last week I was driving after the show. I had to drive Isaac down to Newburgh because he was going to stay down there for a couple of days with some friends he's got down there in Newburgh. So I drove Isaac down after the show, and based on traffic, because it was, the Portland traffic, instead of taking I-5, Waze directed me on 99. And that's fine. I don't mind taking 99, whatever. But, of course, 99, when you get into Sherwood, you've got to mind your P's and Q's, because if you've driven on 99 in Sherwood, you know that there are two intersections separated by about a mile apart, somewhere in that area, and they both have the photo radar at the intersection. So if you run a red light or if you go through the intersection at a certain speed, it will flash the light and take a picture of you, and you get a ticket in the mail. And I've always felt that's unsavory. Like, if a cop pulls me over and I get hit by the cop, I'm perfectly fine with that. It's like man-on-man crime. I was speeding. You were doing your job. You caught me. I'm guilty. No problem. But I feel like it's cheating. Like, if you're using some type of like technology or detection equipment in an intersection where I go through and you hit me for going 7 miles per hour over or 10 miles per hour over, or maybe I decide to try and goose it through a yellow light and I get hit in the middle of the intersection, I don't think it's fair. I feel like it's entrapment, and I don't like it. So anyways, I'm coming back, and I'm well aware of those intersections because I've been hit by them before. So my mind and body are programmed to drive at a certain pace in Sherwood on 99 because you know where the intersection's at, and you got to pay attention. So I'm coming back home after dropping Isaac off, and I go through one of those intersections, and I don't know what's going on. I was listening to something on the radio or whatever the case may be. But in the corner of my eye, I saw a flicker of a light, and I was like, oh, no. what the flip? And I knew what that was. I was going through one of those intersections, and the flicker of the light, and I looked down at my speedometer, and I was going 5 miles per hour over. I think the speed limit there on that road is 45. I was going 50. I was 5 miles per hour over, and I'm like, was that for me? And then I was thinking, like, wait a second, would they give me a ticket for going 5 over? And then I started to wonder if maybe it was someone who was going the other direction but was going through too fast, and the flicker of the light was from that side. But I couldn't really tell because it was daylight, so it was a little bit – the whole situation was fuzzy. But I'm just – it's one of those things now where I'm just waiting for that piece of mail to come, where it shows you – It's annoying, too, when you open it up and you see your picture and you know it's you, and it's like, crapola. There's no way I cannot look someone straight in the face and say that is not me. Now, Brendan, how fast were you going the last time you got tagged by one of those intersection deals out in Sherwood, because you live out there?
Yeah, so once bitten and once only, Chad. So if my memory serves, so you were right on, 45. I was going 56, so they got me. There wasn't much argument. The 50 when the speed goes up to 55, it's not until after you get past the Home Depot there. So again, I didn't have much argument, and
guilty.
Like I said, I went through the just me being me. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to court and do all this. Got all dressed up, and I've said this before. The traffic court judge is a tough guy, so you're not liable to get a lot of benefit there either. So you're kind of stuck with it.
Wow. So what was the fine amount before the judge dropped it for you?
Yeah, I want to say it was like ticket in the two. This was again probably 6 or 7 years ago now, but probably a ticket in the twos, and I think he knocked like $75 off of it. Maybe 100, but God bless my mom, who was kind of there with me, and she would tell you I was not a happy camper when I left that traffic court that morning, Chad.
Oh my gosh! All right, so that's something to keep in mind. All right, now my good friend Ken Guffey from First Response Security has just chimed in. FYI, they will not give you a ticket unless it's 10 over in Sherwood. Ironically, I just met with Ty, the chief of Sherwood PD today. He's a friend of mine, and we actually were talking about that. Hey, Ken, will you please hit up your friend and tell him to wipe away anything that might have my picture on it, please, my friend. So it is. So 10 is the key number, right?
Is right, considering that it's 10. That's
you were 11. You were 1 mile per hour over the threshold.
See, you knew it. Yep, you knew it, right? So in that case, Chad, that's a weight off your shoulders, my brother.
Okay, I should be okay then. All right, big thanks to Brendan for engineering the program, Kerry Eggers, the Dean of Portland Sports, for joining the show. Hey, Ken, my man Ken Guffey, providing some good information. I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. Ken's got my back. All right, you guys have a good night. I'll be back tomorrow with the Rip City Drive at 3 on your home of the Blazers, Rip City Radio 620.